thank you for visiting my channel. Today I'll be riding this gorgeous 2019 Ducati 959 Panigale. I've dreamed of owning a Ducati for many years. Actually, when I was in university some 24 years ago, I did dream that I won the lottery, and then I went straight out and I bought a beautiful bright red Ducati 916, which at the time was one of the most desirable bikes on the planet. And then I rode it all over town, showing it off to all of my friends. Waking up from that dream was very depressing. This Panigale is every bit as beautiful and desirable as the old 916, but I have to tell you, the ergonomics are very uncomfortable. To be fair, I'm not young and I have bad back, neck, hips, knees and shoulders. A younger rider would have a higher tolerance for the cramped riding posture. This is a dedicated sport bike, so aggressive ergonomics are to be expected. The clip-ons are very low and put a lot of stress on the wrists, and the rear sets are high. I'm surprised that I'm able to get my feet on the pegs as I'm wearing my tall adventure boots. The 959 was manufactured from 2016 to 2019. It was the successor to the 899 and was replaced in 2020 by the Panigale V2, which looked like little more than a name change. It's powered by a 955cc liquid-cooled 90-degree L-twin engine, producing 157 horsepower at 10,500 RPM and 74.2 pounds-foot of torque at 9,000 RPM, or 107.4 Newton meters. The top speed is a claimed 282 kilometers per hour, or 175 miles per hour. The engine rides in an aluminium monocoque frame and is suspended by 43mm Forks and Sachs shock, both of which are fully adjustable. There was a more expensive version, the 959 Corse, which was equipped with Ohlins suspension front and rear. Brakes are excellent. On the front, radially mounted Brembo Monobloc calipers and two 320mm discs and a 245mm in the rear, both with ABS. The 959 has a comprehensive electronics package including a data analyzer, traction control, riding modes, a quick shifter, ABS, a ride-by-wire throttle and Mitsubishi fuel injection. The bike feels very tiny for a liter bike. It's very slender and feels lighter than it is. Wet weight is 441 pounds or 200 kilograms, which is 7 pounds less than a Yamaha R1. The wheelbase is 1,431 millimeters, which is 26 millimeters longer than an R1, 31 millimeters longer than my Yamaha MT-07. This is no surprise given the L-twin engine layout. I think Ducati should actually make a super leggera, a super light version of the 959, or now the V2, given that their 1299 super leggera weighed only 368 pounds. I've seen Ducatis in other colors, but in my opinion, they look best in red, with the possible exception of the tricolor scheme used in the Corse models. As you can see, the 959 is not only technologically impressive, but it's also aesthetically pleasing. It's very well designed. I think the Italian manufacturers have tended to reliably produce some of the most beautiful and iconic motorcycles, particularly Ducati and MV Agusta. Where I do think they fall short is the absence of a broad selection of small capacity motorcycles. My understanding is the smallest capacity bike that they offer at the moment is a Scrambler 62, which is 400 cc's. After that, it's starting at about 803 cc's for the Scrambler lineup, and then the Monster at 937 cc's. So there's a distinct lack of small capacity motorcycles. I do think that will come back to bite them in the near future. You may be aware that in the European Union, new legislation is coming in place starting this year for cars, which will introduce speed limiters, and eventually you can expect to see these on motorcycles as well. And once they do, what it will eventually lead to is an inability to exceed the speed limit. So if you have let's say the fastest speed limit here in my province is 120 kilometers per hour, which you can do on 125. So if you absolutely cannot exceed that speed limit, then having 200 horsepower becomes completely redundant. So I would think you would start to see 1200 cc bikes and other large capacity sport bikes begin to fade away, as many riders would then turn to smaller capacity motorcycles. Now, I know Ducati prefers to target the premium end of the market, but there is no reason why premium has to equate with large capacity motorcycles. There's no reason why they can't offer smaller bikes. Now, if you consider Japan in the 1980s and 90s, when they had very stringent stepped licensing programs, it made it very difficult for people there to get licenses for motorcycles larger than 400 cc's. To get a larger capacity license at that time would have required several years and some pretty strict and difficult tests to pass. Therefore, the majority of motorcyclists tended to not to exceed that limit. And that created a market for premium 400cc and 250cc motorcycles. And as a result, they offer no backing. So the kind of bikes that were available then, the bikes that were lifted off 400 GSXR 400 and 250, and they offer the CBR 400cc, the VFR 400, 30 is a little better than the NC30. There is quite an incredible lineup of motorcycles, and when I say these are spectacular, we're talking about 20 years ago or more, and you had 400cc four-cylinder motorcycles producing up as much as 60 horsepower, which would absolutely trounce any of the 300 or 400cc motorcycles produced today. They're able to do that because people who could afford buy premium motorcycles but did not have the licenses to ride large capacity motorcycles, instead look for their performance in a smaller package. And I think if we do start to see technology being introduced on motorcycles to limit the speeds, then you would probably start to see the same thing. And companies like Ducati that target the premium market but do not offer smaller capacity motorcycles, I think they will be in trouble. Another advantage of offering smaller bikes is that they allow them to bring newer riders into their fold, who then remain, hopefully, with brand loyalty with that brand throughout their riding careers. I know I started out, my first proper motorbike was the Yamaha RS 100cc two-stroke, and I followed that up within a year or two with two Yamaha RXS 100s. Had a Yamaha YX600S Radian after that, which was four-cylinder. I had a couple of Yamaha R3s. I had my Yamaha TO7. I think I had 6 or 7 Yamahas. Many motorcycles that I've owned in my lifetime. So you can see how advantageous it would be to be bringing new riders into the market on your brands. And remembering back to the late 1980s and the early 90s, when Ducati was owned by Cagiva did actually offer a line of really beautiful small two-stroke motorcycles. the highlight of that lineup was the Caliper Mito 125 bike I absolutely adored. It was a production from 1989 to 2009. But in 1994, it was redesigned by Massimo Tamburini, who was the chief engineer at Ducati, responsible for designing the Ducati 916. And he essentially cloned it, so the Caliper Mito 125 was basically a miniature 916 bike. It was absolutely gorgeous, very much in demand for a well-heeled team with parent-type pockets. And eventually they offered eventually they had a prototype 500cc single Husqvarna engine running in that chassis, which would have been really interesting even today. So I doubt they'll bring Cagiva back, but I see no reason why Ducati can't expand their lineup, more broadly in that smaller capacity range than that 400cc scrambler. I will not be able to get out of the city today, so I will not be able to benefit from this bike's high-speed handling, or to see what it can do. This is not a city bike, and it would be a terrible commuter. I can't think of a more excruciating experience of being trapped in rush hour traffic on this bike. Even at the speeds that I've been going at, it is really quite painful. At slow speeds, there's not sufficient wind to lift my chest or to take some of the pressure off of my wrists. I do actually have a good friend who's of similar age to myself. He owns a 959 and he rode it once on one of our long group rides, what we call the Duffy Lake Loop here. It's a 650 kilometer day trip, took about 9 hours. He really suffered. And that was the last time I saw him on his Ducati. He also owns a very comfortable Yamaha 1200 Super Tenere, and he does about 90% of his riding on that bike. And I completely understand him. Having said that, he did still keep the 959. Always the question will come to at the end is, would I buy this bike? Now, to be honest, I cannot see any practical use for this motorcycle, not in my life. If I were young and very fit, it would give me a reason to go to track days. But at this point in my life and in my physical condition, it would be very hard to live with. And of course, like all Ducatis, it is very expensive. Now, having said all of that, if I were to win the lottery, and if I was able to afford a very big and diverse collection of motorcycles, or at least say 4 or 5 of them, I would absolutely buy one of these in a heartbeat. I don't expect I would ride it for very long, and I would probably keep it in my living room just to look at it. But if I had sunny, dry, warm summer day and a beautiful twisty road with no traffic and no speed traps or speed limits to worry about, then it would be an absolute dream to have this bike and to be able to take it out for short runs. But I don't think I could handle anything more than probably 30 minutes in a typical ride. It's certainly not a bike I would take out for long highway rides or to ride around the city, certainly not to go to the grocery. It's a sport bike, that's pretty much all you would want to use it for. Now, we're at the end of my video, so I'd like to thank you all again for watching. If you are interested in motorcycling content, please do click the subscribe button. I know I don't have very many videos up yet, but I will have more. I have a fairly large backlog of videos that I'm waiting to process. It does take me quite a while, as I'm not the youngest of moto vloggers, but I do have my teenage daughter to assist me. So again, check back, you will see more videos similar to this where I'm riding and reviewing other motorcycles. I will also be posting videos of trail riding and exploring some of the Forest Service roads here, as well as some of the longer group rides and tours where I'm riding sometimes up to 1,000 kilometers in one day, and I hope you enjoy those. So again, please do check back. Hopefully you enjoy this channel, and hopefully you'll be enjoying my future posts. Thank you again, and have a look at my last video on the Zero SRF.